Thank you very much. Delighted to be here with you today. Uh, there we go. So share a little bit about our seed grant project. Amber and I were co-principal investigators of this project. So the title of our presentation today is Blending Migratory Wildlife Science, Curatorial Practice, and Visual Arts for High School Educational Programming. And I just want to highlight this picture here, which really captures, this is, as you'll see in the presentation, this was one of the student participants at the Cobscope Institute that worked with Amber's team with basically tagging what you see here as a American woodcock. So a very exciting opportunity for this young student to participate. On the project, we had a number of external and internal collaborators. Our external collaborator was the lead teacher, Kara McCrimmon, of the Cobscope Experiential Program at the Cobscope Institute in Washington County. Our Maine collaborators were with the Zillman Art Museum, Rochelle Lawrence, who's our museum educator and assistant curator, and with the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Conservation Biology, Liam Berrigan, a PhD candidate, and Wesley Hutchins, undergraduate student and top scholar, played a very important role in this project. So step one for us for this project, Amber and I worked together to identify our targeted outcomes and the themes for the project. And with this project, we set out to expand UMaine's mission of educational outreach and engagement to high school students, particularly in rural communities. We wish to install new infrastructure to support STEM research and experiential learning on campus. We wanted to blend science and art to develop mitigation practices to conserve wildlife on campus at the Cobscope Institute and at home. We wanted to provide mentoring and role model opportunities for UMaine's undergraduate and graduate students, introduce high school students to scientific research, visual art, and importantly, the UMaine experience, and introduce students to careers in museums through engaging in curatorial practice, along with improving student writing skills through the editing processes that we standard when we're working on exhibitions at the museum. Particularly, we focused on the migration of birds and butterflies, specifically monarch butterflies, as you see in the top slide, and the American woodcock that the young Henry was holding in the first slide. So in organizing this project, we convened our partners in the program to create the educational objectives. As always with partnerships, everybody comes to the table to determine how we might go about this project. And we had a wonderfully collaborative process along the way. We had planning meetings with the Cobscope Institute's lead teachers and the UMaine team, including our Liam, and it was involved very much in that project, to define the educational objectives of the project and the timeline and other details. The project was designed intentionally to provide multiple experiences for the Cobscope students throughout the year. We felt it was very important that not only did these students come to the UMaine campus and to the Zillman Art Museum, but we also took our resources to Washington County and to the site of their school and their classroom. We also organized evaluations were conducted after the September campus visit to assess the program's activities and understand what to maintain and what we might need to improve upon in the future. So the project really began our first session with March 2nd, where the Zillman staff introduced the high school students from Cobscook to works by Walter Rich, an artist who passed away in 1948. Particularly 20 original paintings by Rich. These were created as, they're all original works of art. They were created though as illustrations for Rich's book published in 1907 titled Feathered Game of the Northeast. And there you see a depiction of an American woodcock by Walter Rich. So our next part of the project was March 16th. We introduced students at Cobscook Institute into the curatorial process. We gave them a glimpse of what we were working on, the various stages of our exhibition development. And all of these things worked beautifully with this first seed grant. We were lucky that a private collector loaned 20 works, original works by Rich to the museum. They were very enthusiastic with the fact that we were going to use these works for high school students in particular, and that they were going to be showcased at the museum. So we received, kind of deviated from the museum's norm. We actually received permission to take all of these original works of art to Washington County. In this session, you'll see I'm there with the gloved hands, introducing the students to the original works. And then each of the participants were asked to select one of the bird species, and that would be the subject of their research. So then they began as part of the projects, beginning work on the didactic text that would accompany the exhibition that would be showcased at the museum. And that exhibition has since closed. During this visit to Cobscook, we introduced students to a little bit about standard museum didactic text, talking about things like word length and things like that. And we introduced them, provided them sample text, and talked a little bit about the editing process of what we were going to be doing with working with them on their writing. Then the following day, still at the Cobscook Institute, museum educator Rochelle Lawrence, she led the students in a relief printing process, specifically lino cuts that you see here. And the students were asked to, select a bird species and produce an addition of prints, which is what you see here on the screen. And then the culmination of the curatorial practice part of the program was the actual mounting of the exhibition at the Zillman. Here you can see one of the Cobscook students, Katie Ferguson, who attended the opening reception of their exhibition that they organized, standing by the work of art that she chose and also the text that she wrote there. So it's been a wonderful project. We gained a lot of wonderful rewards of working with these students. And as Amber will mention, we thought it was wonderful that we introduced these students to the Maine experience, and hoping that might lead to potential new attendees, and enrollment at Maine. So, Amber.
Thank you. That just the microphone. I'm a little shorter than George. Thank you. So for the science program part of this, I also went to the Cobscook Institute in May and introduced students to natural history of migratory birds and monarchs, introduced them to the topics that they would dive more deeply into when they came to campus in September. So we had a 2-day experience for them on campus. On day 1, they started with an activity with Wesley Hutchins, who's here in the room. Hi, Wesley. He's a wildlife ecology undergraduate researcher, as George mentioned, and he's been working with monarch butterflies for a research project in my lab for the last couple of years. And for his project, he's very interested in understanding more about monarch migration. And to do that, I'm using my pointer here, you'll see there's a little tiny tag that he attaches to these monarchs. It's a radio transmitter, and you can see the antenna here. And about the smallest kind of tag you could attach to an animal, and then releases the monarch, and then gives us the opportunity to see where it goes. And so this was an activity that we had the high school students participate in. They got to see a demonstration of the tagging, and then we released 2 of them right by Nutting Hall on campus. And after the release, we introduced them to how we go about tracking monarchs and other animals with these little tags on them. And we started off by talking about how you can track them on the ground with an antenna and a receiver and follow them around that way. We also introduced them to the Modus Wildlife Tracking System, and these are a network of permanent automated stations that are out there 24/7 searching for these tags. And we just mounted one here on the roof of Nutting Hall. And so we will be able to not only track animals that we tag, but any other researchers anywhere in the world, potentially we will pick up their animals. So for example, a semi-palmated sandpiper tagged in James Bay in Canada might fly by Nutting Hall on its way to South America for the winter. And we will help them understand the migratory path of their birds. So not only do we learn about the animals we're marking, but we help others in this kind of community of science. So it's very exciting that campus will now be part of that and to create research and educational opportunities for our students. The next activity on day 1 is I introduced them to bird migration and some of the perils and threats that face birds as they migrate across the Western Hemisphere. And one of the big issues is bird window collisions. And I bet everybody has experienced this. They've either seen a dead bird at home or on campus or other places. And so we have a protocol that allows anyone to assess the risks associated with specific windows. And so we gave the students these protocols and we assigned them to windows around Nutting Hall. And here's an example of a student here conducting a window assessment, and then being able to assess which windows are high or low risk for collisions. And those are potentially windows, the high risk ones that you might want to try to mitigate and do something with those windows to prevent future mortality. And you can see here, here's a great example at Nutting Hall, of these big picture windows here at the entrance of the building. You can see they perfectly reflect the sky and trees and vegetation that, from a bird's perspective, looks like a perfect place to fly, right? And so they fly in that direction, not realizing that that's really a plate of glass. And so Nutting Hall actually is one of the more problematic buildings on campus in terms of bird window collisions. So this was a great opportunity for students to kind of assess the differences between different types of windows and situations. On the second day on campus, Liam Berrigan, a PhD candidate in my lab, introduced the students to data. And he brought up a data set from woodcock migration specifically. He's studying woodcock for his PhD. And we also track those birds using a different type of tag across their full migratory cycle. And so we have GPS accurate locations of where those birds are throughout the year. And we gave that data to the students to look at and to assess what different types of migratory habitats are these birds using. And so they were able to go in and quantify the different types of habitat that they were used. They were able to summarize and analyze that data and be able to then interpret it. And so this was an important part of the scientific process to introduce the students to. There's more to science than the exciting technology and the handling of animals. There's also the data collection and what do you do with the data afterwards and how do you interpret it and eventually apply it to improve management and conservation of these species. This was an important educational objective for the Copscope Institute. So it was an important component for our project. In the afternoon on the second day, the students returned to the Zillman Art Museum, and they created designs for a window glass film project. In order to reduce collisions to windows, one of the options to reduce risk is to apply a film to the outside of the window. And you can do this with just regular kind of UV tinted film, but it's more interesting when you can add a design to it. And so the students came up with some design ideas for what they might like to apply to a film that will then be placed on windows at the Cobscook Institute. So this is an ongoing project. So eventually the films will be produced and sent to the Institute and actually applied to some of their windows. So it was fun to have the students work on some design options. So what did we learn from our program? Well, as George mentioned, we did conduct an evaluation of not only the students, but the instructors and organizers. And from the student evaluations, we asked them what was one of the most interesting things they learned. And Wesley will appreciate this. They actually really enjoyed the monarch activity. And I think it's because they were introduced to some really neat technology, live wildlife, getting to see the tagging, getting to see the release back to the wild. Another important component, I think, is actually Wesley himself. I think having somebody that's close in age that can serve as a role model, I think is very important. They could see that in 2 or 3 years, maybe themselves being a researcher like Wesley, they might be able to see that more easily than they can relate to me being a little bit older than Wesley, that, you know, this might be something pretty neat that's not too far in their future. One of the other questions was how interesting did they find just their experience on campus? And 9 of 14 gave it the highest rating of very interesting, which suggested that they really enjoyed just seeing the campus. They had lunch in the bear den. Some of them went to the bookstore. They got to see buildings on campus, plus all these activities. And that really made a big impression on many of them. And that has the potential to increase recruitment opportunities. We have now introduced some new infrastructure on campus, a Modus Wildlife Tracking System station that now creates opportunities for research and education for really anyone in our community. The students gain valuable experiences by interacting with both researchers and art professionals. They now have a greater awareness of a variety of career opportunities. I think one of the things that we demonstrated is that you don't need to be just in science or just in the arts, that there's opportunities to blend the two, that these don't need to be siloed parts of what we do on campus. And there's a lot of opportunity for conservation when we blend art and science as well, and coming up with solutions that are creative, aesthetically pleasing, that creates a lot of discussion and interest in the public, and it also creates well-rounded students. And if you have questions about this program, you can reach out to George and myself, and that's the end.